Greetings, magical mages and spiritual sages. Welcome to the Age of the Mage podcast. This is episode 72. I wanted to give you a glimpse behind the scenes and some what I go through in bef- in the process of determining what to create for you, what to share with you through the podcast. And I have a good example here, because it's timely and it's directly relating to explaining this kind of glimpse behind the scenes to you, as well as this podcast itself. Okay, so as many of you know, a few weeks ago, I shared with you that out of the blue, lying in bed in the middle of the night, the strong voice came in and said, call the protectors. Call on the protectors and the guardians, the earth guardians, this group of people waiting to come together, meet each other, and work their unique styles of magic and protection in your world. They're ready, and you need them. These reach out with a message directly aimed, relating to those who feel an affinity for protection work, whether it's spiritual, magical, whatever mode, and also the guardian archetype. So, yeah, as you know, I followed up on that, and it was a unique experience because it came out of the blue. And when I sat down to produce that podcast, I honestly didn't know what I was supposed to say. I knew I was going to do it. I said, oh, yes, I will. Following my guide's advice, I knew that this had to be done. But when it came time to do it, I was like, but what was I supposed to say? 1 minute call out. What was? And so I kind of put my trust and my faith in. I opened up my mind and turned on the recording and just let the information come through. Holding in my mind the energy of protection and the energy of guardianship. And it did. It came through. And we were very, very blessed to receive messages from a few people who did feel a strong affinity for that particular episode and felt that calling within themselves that they are going to be serving as some sort of protector, some sort of guardian. As these new earth timelines emerge and so many shifts take place, we need them so badly on personal as well as collective levels. And over the weeks since then, I have given thought to why I was instructed to call in protectors. I've discussed this with others because, I probably would have said, let's get some warriors rounded up. I'm ready to fight. We're ready to go to the mat on some of these issues we want to protect and change in our world. But no, that wasn't the instruction. And I decided to honor that. And so I wanted to let you know that one way that information comes to me for these podcasts and for these things I share with you is direct inspiration from a guide I'm familiar with, or if it's a new entity I don't know. I do a lot of work to get to know that entity and determine that it's working for the light and the right, and the message is worth sharing. So this is one way that ideas do come to me, and I am doing my best to honor those and pass those along to you. All right, let's look at another thing that has happened over the course of the last few weeks. I was producing podcasts about the 9 magical archetypes. This is going to become more important, I think, than most of us realize as this project kind of coalesces and we do start meeting each other. We have these small groups and we form some bonds of trust and we begin to work together. I think those archetypes are going to come back around and be very important, as they will help us relate to each other and help us find roles that we do our best work in, things like that. So I produced these introductions to the 9 basic archetypes with their subcategories. And I was sailing right along, and as I was writing and getting the kind of intuitive downloads I needed to get so that I would give you as accurate as I could get information on those. Everything was flowing fine, and I was releasing one every day or every other day. And I came to the last one, the ninth archetype, which I have called the Weaver. And I could not get it out. I thought, this is silly. Certainly I can sit down and write 3 paragraphs about the Weaver and get this published and shared with you, because it doesn't make sense to stop at the 8th archetype and then put another video in between that one, or podcast between that one and the ninth. Well, it just wouldn't come. It just wouldn't come. I don't know. It was a combination of 3D world interruptions, and my mind couldn't just settle down to it. I couldn't get the open field I needed for the right information. Perhaps some of it was foreign to me. I just wasn't able to pass on. I felt like I'm not getting an accurate ideas here to pass them on to you. And I want to represent these archetypes as well as I can, so that they resonate with those of you that find yourself, attracted to one or more of them. Well, of course, I only intended to postpone this a day or two, and life had a different plan. So here's another process that I think all of us can relate to, besides the first one, which is that kind of direct hit. Life gets in the way. Our path, we've intended what we want to do, right? We've set a general intention. Like in my case, I want to get this Weaver's podcast done. I had that intention. It was in the back of my mind every single day. It had formed, it had etheric bulk. It was in the realm of manifestation, but it wasn't happening. And we all do this with various things. We know we want to achieve something or get something or clear something, and yet day after day we go on, and that doesn't happen. And other things do. Other wonderful things happen, and some negative things happen. But for some reason, this initial intention doesn't manifest. And so I was going through that kind of process with the Weavers. And what happened is that some, I don't know what you might want to call it, my own higher soul, my own higher self, guardians that are watching over this project and the podcast, whatever it was, it had another idea for me here. They wanted me to experience the Weaver before I shared that podcast with you. They wanted me to live this out, in a sense, instead of just giving me that direct push download as I got with the protectors. They wanted me to experience the Weaver on different levels. And so my life unfolded in some mysterious ways, actually. Some guests arrived who found us just by following a spiritual thread. And we had some magnificent, deep talks and sharing and bonding occur while they were visiting. And lo and behold, it was revealed to me over some time spent with them that they were Weavers, at least one, and one of their close relatives. Definitely one of, fell into this powerful, magical category of a Weaver. And so I was suddenly living, sharing space, having all-night talks with an actual Weaver, with the energy. I was able to feel it. What does that feel like? What does the Weaver think like? What draws them? What motivates them? What's going on with Weavers? And I was gifted with this one-on-one exposure to some very powerful weaving energy. That's not to say these wonderful women who visited don't have other styles and other powers and other archetypes, but this was prominent. The second thing that happened was, during their stay, I shared this experience in a prior podcast about near traffic accidents that happened for me, and the realization that I was given about the events that led me to understand the Weaver's web and how we all have these webs, and how the connections between points are now becoming very significant and very important. And so I lived through, thank goodness, because it could have happened, it could have been another whole outcome there. But and feel free to go back and watch that or listen to that podcast. I'll list it in the description below. But it was a personal experience that came home to me in a very dramatic fashion about this web work, this network work, these lines, these etheric lines that connect us, connect points all over the map of the cosmic spheres. And so it's interesting to me that at the close of some of these experiences, and when these dear friends left, and I sat down to start up again the work with the podcast, that I suddenly knew, oh, it's time to do the Weavers. I had the information I needed. Now, it sounds simple, and even if you listen to the Weaver Archetype podcast, you think, well, how hard could that have been, Mary? I mean, my goodness, it's only a few paragraphs of information. But it comes from my heart because I was gifted with experience. I was given fields of energy to be around and to exist in that translated to me the language of the weaver and also transferred the energetic signature of weavers. And so because I wanted to share that process with you, because I know that happens to all of us in many different ways. So now we have this one process of the direct download, and then we have this second one of life, a path we need to walk in order to get the experience that settles in us and gives us our information. And then the third. So now I want to talk about dragons a bit. Now, personally, I don't believe I have any dragon memories. I love fantasy. I love fantasy novels and fantasy MMOs, and I love the worlds of fantasy, but I have never been particularly drawn to dragons. And so this is foreign to me, again, a concept slightly foreign. And in the beginning, some of the beginning early stages of our project a few years ago, we were very fortunate to meet some powerful people, and we have remained in touch with them, and marvelous magicians, marvelous spirits. And after a few days of interacting with these people and kind of establishing trust and establishing safe feelings, deep feelings began to be shared. And lo and behold, about 3 or 4 of them, and there were only a few to begin with, expressed deep ties to dragons. Now, each one was an individual, and some of them didn't even know each other until we had come together as a little group. And so nobody had the exact same take on dragons. Everyone was slightly different. Their relationship with the mythological being, the etheric dragons, was slightly different. But it was light, it was good, it was strong, it was powerful, it carried dragon energy. And we were all surprised to find out how many of this small group actually felt this kinship with dragons out of the blue. Like, wow. And so we kind of, when you become a magician or you begin to dedicate yourself to a spiritual path, part of the process is to honor subtlety, to begin to honor nuances, because this is how magic enters your life. For the most part, sometimes we have very dramatic events, but for the most part, it's this string of very subtle events that start entering your life, and it's the recognition of those events, and it is giving them the meaning they deserve that is part of the magician's path. And so I saw, there's a pattern here. There's something occurring. And once again, it really wasn't directly my pattern, but I had to look outside of myself and just start and recognize how unlikely this was and the nuances might mean something. So kept my eyes and ears open, and ever since then I've gone on uh, producing things and working with John and Dana and enjoying bringing modern masters together. All right, so time has gone by now. Well, lo and behold, inside of our active chat group, I would call it on Modern Masters, with time again, expanding and giving people a sense of security and discussions becoming more heartfelt over time and things. Here we go again with dragons emerging. Again, it's a small group. It is not likely, if you look at statistics or percentages with this size of a group, I think it's meaningful to see so many identifying with dragons. It's not, it is a significant percentage. And I was already on the alert. I had already gone through this experience with another group of people and had already assimilated that as important and to keep my third eye open to any kinds of clues along this line. And so I began just a few nights ago, I got into an even deeper discussion with one of these, our wonderful members who has this close affinity with dragons. And during this discussion, it just became apparent that the time was here to bring this recognition of this recurring pattern out into the world and share it through a podcast and share it through a call out to others who may feel this affinity because evidently the dragons are gathering. So all of this is about the great gathering. I mean, at the heart of Modern Masters is simply a platform to support the great gathering, to support those who feel a resonance to some of the messages and to coming together and to helping the world and to doing so by using magic and spirit. And so this, all these little chunks, all these little bits and pieces, they're just parts, they're small gatherings that are part of the great gathering. And I'm in the position to honor these things. This is part of my calling, is to recognize the small gatherings and help them unite into larger and larger gatherings, right? So here's this third process. This third process is the repetition of patterns that if you aren't aware, you will miss. You will just brush them aside as coincidences or something interesting, but nothing to really concern yourself about. Well, now that is not what the magician, the sage, the mage, the intuitive, the messenger, the galactic emissary, that's not how we're going to live, right? We recognize those patterns as meaningful and significant, and we tuck them away until they are reactivated. That's what separates out the person living in with a dedication to spirit and soul, with this magical zone. That's what separates us out. This is one of those features, and this is another way this is another thing that happens to me as I choose subjects to talk to you about. It's a lifetime of observing patterns that I can now recognize as being important for you to see, important for you to know about. And it's interesting because I'm getting older now, and I would have preferred, in my human way, I was like, hey, why didn't I bring this project off the ground 20 years ago? I was a bit perkier and a bit prettier and a little more, enticing for the public. Why? Well, why at the grandma stage, right? Well, I needed 20 more years of pattern seeing. I needed this so I could bring these out for you. And in great humility, I do this because I had to be humble to myself. And now I can appreciate those 20 years and what they brought to me. And I'm able to share, hundreds of more ideas with you that now have been validated, now have some grounding to them. I have a discernment I didn't have then. And so now I can honor you and your willingness to take part in this journey, and your listening time and your energy by bringing you more as a result of that particular type of input. So to rehash, we have the direct download, right? We have the experiential that happens, and then we have the pattern seeing and the recognition of those, and then aha, it dawns on you, they become important. All right, so we have these three ways that information can come to us. I mean, there's many others, I'm sure, but these are the ones I wanted to cover today because this ties into the point of the podcast. I would like to extend an invitation once again to the protectors and guardians. You know who you are. And now I would like to expand on that and extend this calling out to the weavers. There appears to be an activation going on now for weavers. And I will list the Weaver podcast link also in the description for you. And I'd like to formally invite you to begin listening or communicate with me, anything that feels right to you. Uh, if you listen to the Weaver information and it resonates, please, and you feel comfortable, please do feel free to get in touch, because I believe you're being called and activated now to work maybe hand in hand with some of the protectors and guardians. And in our last podcast, we talked about the etheric work that has to take place if we want to make change in our world. That was episode 71, and you can listen to that as well to get ideas, because I think the protectors and weavers are both activated now, and that's why I am getting this urge to share this podcast with you. And let's go to the third one, the dragons. All right, so same thing. Same thing. I believe now, dragons, I do not understand the dragon society. I don't pretend to have that close of an affinity with that species to be able to share with you all the details of how it works. But I've been trying to learn a little bit about it. And as with any race, as with any species, there are factions, all right? All humans aren't the same. Talk to a star family emissary, and they're going to tell you, hey, we're not all the same. Even the reptilians that we universally kind of consider dark and negative beings and definitely responsible for many of our problems here, I'm willing to bet there are sets and groups of reptilians that are not happy with their race and their species, and yet we do clump them all together. So we tend to make these generalities, and I think that's easy to do when we have different, these kind of extra-dimensional and multidimensional, interdimensional races and species, like, Sasquatch or Bigfoot or, shifters, things we don't understand that kind of live in the betwixt and between. And we do this probably with dragons. And yet I believe that there are, let's call them clans or tribes, groups of dragons. There's probably a word that I don't know. Those of you who are dragon people can tell me. There are probably large groups coming together, because I'm getting too many dragon influences now coming in. I am receiving people aligned with the dragons, and this is that pattern, this pattern type of recognition that I've shared with you that's coming into play in a big way, big scale. Okay, so I believe that at least certain factions of the dragons are trying to gather and trying to support us Earth humans in our efforts right now to be able to choose this best timeline for ourselves. So I want to put a call out to those of you who are affiliated with dragons. This may be a spiritual overlay that you have, some kind of attraction that whenever you can, whenever you have the chance, you read about dragons, even if it's considered fantasy or fiction. This may be dreams you have. This may be a dragon that has appeared to you. Anybody that feels a resonance to this message and would perhaps like to combine their alignment with dragon energy with one of these other archetypes to begin working to help our world, to help humanity, and to help your own life, of course. This is the call I'm putting out today. And so I hope that I hope you will feel this calling. It's from my heart, and I'm sure it's full of holes and not in any way intended to fill in all the blanks, because I'm operating on a territory that is not even fully explained to me. There are steps that I take that are based on faith and based on intuition, and I do not even fully understand all those steps as they unfold. Most often I am able to look back on the journey and say, oh, I get it now. They all fit together. Wonderful. Perfect. Uh, so I do hope you'll forgive me for things that I miss. For those of you who carry these affinities, these don't happen. They just don't happen to be my strengths. And so I am speaking to you based on inspiration and intuition and experience rather than knowledge, firsthand knowledge. And I do hope that you can receive this message knowing that with some patience and forgiveness for the flaws. Anyway, I'd be so honored if any of you feel that you would like to begin communications or anything, start sharing. I will leave you with that for now, and I will return soon again, and we'll say goodbye for now.